You're stuck in traffic, and right in front of you is a brand new pickup truck. Gleaming, massive, decked out like a rolling penthouse. Leather interior, chrome trim, a touchscreen bigger than your laptop. And you think to yourself, how on earth does that person afford that thing? Because here's what I know about that truck. It probably cost somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000. And statistically speaking, the person behind the wheel is probably earning a pretty average income. I'm not judging. I'm genuinely curious. And once I dug into the numbers, what I found was honestly alarming. Welcome back to Wealth Forge 26. I'm your host, and today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most fascinating financial puzzles in modern America. How everyday people are somehow financing vehicles that cost more than the median household earns in an entire year. If that question keeps you up at night, hit subscribe and drop a thumbs up on this video. Let's get into it. Let's start with the raw numbers, because I think most people genuinely don't know how extreme things have gotten. The average new vehicle payment in the United States has now crossed $700 per month. Not for a Ferrari, not for a Lamborghini, for a standard new vehicle purchased by an ordinary American family. Jump into truck and SUV territory, which now account for the majority of vehicles sold. And you're regularly looking at $900, $1,000, even $1,200 a month. Multiply that out over 7 years and you're talking about $100,000 in payments. On a depreciating asset, that will be worth maybe $18,000 when the loan is finally paid off. And wages? They've grown. But nowhere near fast enough to justify these kinds of numbers under any traditional personal finance framework. Financial advisors have historically recommended keeping total transportation costs, including insurance, fuel, and maintenance, under 15% of your take-home pay. Millions of Americans are now spending double that on car payments alone. So how is it happening? Let's break it down piece by piece. The single most powerful weapon the auto industry has ever invented isn't a new engine or a flashy feature. It's a simple question. What monthly payment works for you? That one question fundamentally shifts the entire transaction. Instead of asking, can I afford this $68,000 truck? The buyer is now asking, can I afford $850 a month? And $850 sounds a lot more manageable than $68,000. Here's the mechanics. Auto lenders realize that if you stretch a loan from 4 years to 6, 7, or even 8 years, you can drop the monthly payment by hundreds of dollars, even on outrageously priced vehicles. Some lenders are now offering 10-year auto loans, a decade, on a vehicle. Let's run a quick comparison. Take a $60,000 truck. On a 4-year loan at 6% interest, you're paying roughly $1,400 a month. That hurts. Most people walk away. Stretch it to 7 years. Now you're at about $880. That feels survivable. People sign. But what they don't focus on, because the salesperson certainly isn't going to point it out, is that the 7-year loan costs them nearly $16,000 more in total interest than the 4-year loan. They paid $16,000 extra for the exact same truck, and by year 5, they almost certainly owe more on it than it's worth. That's the monthly payment illusion. The number on the sticker disappears. All that matters is the number on the monthly statement. Here's where things start to compound, and I mean that in the worst possible way. Say someone bought that $60,000 truck 2 years ago on a 7-year loan. They've been making payments faithfully. But the truck has depreciated, as trucks do, and is now worth about $42,000. Meanwhile, they still owe $50,000 on the loan. That's $8,000 of what the industry calls negative equity, underwater, upside down, whatever you want to call it. They owe more than it's worth. Now they want a new vehicle. Maybe they got bored. Maybe they need something different. Maybe they were just in the dealership getting an oil change, and someone showed them something shiny. The dealer's solution? Roll that $8,000 gap right into the new loan. Finance the new truck and the leftover debt from the old one together. The buyer leaves feeling like they got a fresh start, but they're actually in a worse position than before, carrying hidden debt from a vehicle they no longer own, on top of a new loan for a vehicle they just bought. This cycle repeats. And repeat it does, for millions of Americans who never quite get ahead of their own automotive debt. The dealership loves this model, by the way. A customer trapped in negative equity is a customer who will be back. They have no choice. Now let's talk about something that doesn't show up in the loan paperwork, but drives, no pun intended, most of these decisions. The automotive industry doesn't sell transportation. It hasn't for decades. It sells identity. That truck commercial you've seen 100 times. Rugged terrain, dramatic lighting, some voiceover about grit and determination. It's not showing you a vehicle. It's showing you a version of yourself you'd like to believe in. Capable. Successful. Someone who conquers things. The message is subtle but powerful. The vehicle you drive is a public statement about who you are, and nobody wants to make a weak statement. Marketers have spent billions, not millions, billions, studying exactly what emotional triggers make a person rationalize a financial decision they know is questionable. They know that once you've emotionally committed to a vehicle, your brain starts working backwards, finding justifications instead of reasons. The monthly payment becomes manageable in your mind because you've already decided you want the truck. The math bends to fit the desire. This isn't me criticizing anyone's character. This is just how human psychology works, and these companies are extraordinarily skilled at exploiting it. So we've talked about the loan structures and the psychology. But what's actually happening in people's budgets to make these payments work month to month? Quite a lot, it turns out. Some people restructure their entire lifestyle around the car payment, downsizing their living situation, eliminating discretionary spending, picking up second income streams. I've seen people describe working weekend gig shifts specifically to cover their vehicle costs. Think about that. Working extra hours to pay for the vehicle they use to do that extra work. Others are pulling from retirement accounts, taking 401k loans or early withdrawals for down payments or to cover gaps. They're trading future wealth, compounding, growing, multiplying for present-day transportation. Most don't calculate the actual cost of that trade. It's devastating when you do. And then there's the credit card bridge. Maintenance goes on the card, insurance goes on the card, gas goes on the card. Why? To keep the cash free for the car payment. They're using high-interest revolving debt to subsidize the already expensive fixed debt. It's a financial leak that can quietly spiral into something much worse. Perhaps most extreme, people using home equity, the wealth they've built in their property, to finance vehicle purchases. They are literally mortgaging their financial security to drive something impressive. Let me give you one complete example so you can see the full picture. Someone buys a $55,000 truck, 7-year loan at 6%, monthly payment, roughly $800. Over the life of that loan, about $67,000 in total payments. Insurance on a truck that size, comprehensive, collision, gap coverage, runs at least $220 a month. That's $18,500 over 7 years. Fuel for a truck getting real-world mileage of around 16 miles per gallon with a normal commute? Around $340 a month. That's $28,500 over 7 years. Maintenance and repairs over 7 years on a modern, complex truck. Brake jobs, tires, fluids, the inevitable surprise. Conservatively $13,000. Total cost of ownership over 7 years, approximately $127,000. What is that truck worth at the end of year 7? If they're lucky and maintained it well, maybe $14,000. They spent $127,000 to own something worth $14,000. The truck cost them over $113,000 in net wealth destruction. Now here's the part that's genuinely painful to think about. If that same $800 a month had gone into a broad index fund, earning a historical average of 8% annually, which is actually a conservative long-term estimate, they'd have roughly $72,000 after 7 years. Not only would they have avoided the loss, they would have built real, growing wealth. That's the opportunity cost nobody talks about in the dealership. Here's the thing that makes this cycle so hard to break, even when people are aware of the math. Once someone has tied their sense of self to their vehicle, suggesting they downgrade feels like a personal attack. The truck isn't transportation anymore. It's a symbol of their effort, their success, their worthiness of nice things. When someone has worked hard, genuinely worked hard, they want something tangible to show for it. A reliable used car doesn't feel like a reward. A $70,000 truck does, even if that truck is actively preventing them from building the wealth their hard work should be generating. The financial industry calls this lifestyle inflation. I'd call it the most expensive identity crisis most people never realize they're having. So back to the original question. How do people afford these payments? The honest answer is, most of them don't. Not really. They're financing them through extended loan terms that dramatically inflate total costs. They're cycling through negative equity, paying for cars they no longer drive. They're sacrificing savings, retirement contributions, and financial flexibility, all for the monthly privilege of parking something impressive in their driveway. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, just not in the buyer's favor. The next time you see that gleaming truck in traffic, remember, what you're looking at isn't wealth. It's probably the most expensive thing that person owns, and it's losing value every single mile. The most powerful financial move most people can make isn't complicated. It's just unpopular. Buy less car than you can technically qualify for, and put the difference to work for your actual future. That's it for today's Wealth Forge 26 breakdown. If this gave you a new way to look at the car payment equation, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.